Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. This is episode 162, and we are talking about the mullet of horror movies, the slow burn. Business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah.
I am Liz Williams, and I am joined by
Mike Campbell.
And Eric Lee.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
The mullet. The mullet.
Eric
Serious up at the front of the movie and crazy at the back end.
Eric claims to have had a mullet.
I said mullet-like.
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 Mullet-like or mullet-light?
I didn't both. Yeah, because it wasn't not as much business in the
yeah.
front. I almost had the party in the back.
You definitely had the party in the back.
It was so this was circa 1986 to 1988.
That's about right.
Yeah, that's when you do it.
And actually, it's when I first met Mike.
Yeah, you kind of had a little party in the back.
Mike actually had hair.
I did.
In a full
But not a mullet.
Not a mullet, though?
I was all party.
He had
There's no business.
He had no party because his hair projected out. I referred to it. He had the Barney Rubble haircut because his red hair would project about 3 or 4 inches in pretty much a straight plane in front of his face. It was amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so this one is also a request of one of our patrons from Patreon,
Yay.
Kelly Ledgerwood.
Yay, Kelly! It's about time. So sorry it took so long.
I know, for supporting us. Sorry it took so long. We were year ending it.
Emphasis on the slow.
Yeah.
It's a slow burn.
This
It's
is
a
the
slow
slow
burn
part of
on
slow
everything.
burn.
And we happen to also know that Kelly is a fan of David Malin
And Count Crowley.
and Count Crowley,
Kelly has
and
good taste.
it is going to be a big year for Mr. Malin. So
Indeed.
Kelly, we are going to try and get him back on with us because he is
Heck yeah.
one of our favorite people, a true gentleman, and now becoming a bit of a powerhouse within the genre.
Right.
So
Yeah, and he started his own. I think we mentioned this last week on Spooky Time with the Scariest Things, which you haven't watched yet. Go over to YouTube and check it out. But we mentioned the fact that David Malin has started his own film company in the genre.
So we need to know more.
Yeah. Oh my God, do we ever?
Yeah, it's-
Do we ever?
So we were fortunate to buy into the Malin universe before he sort of broke out at nice time midlife breakout.
Yeah, right before.
Heck yeah.
Kinda like diabetes.
Suicide Squad? Is that what it was called?
I was going to say buy low, sell high.
Yeah, buy low, sell high. Yes, no, but it's like
Buy low, then die is what you. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the diabetes version.
So let's.
right.
So again with
Slow burn. Let's get
Let's
back to slow burn.
Yes,
We'll,
yes,
we'll
yes.
work our way back to the slow part of slow burn.
So I think slow burn isn't just about the pace, right?
No.
It's about how much how you reveal things within a story, and there's
Yep. Yeah.
So the definition
Can
that
be.
I've heard, a journal called Premium Beat. We'll give them this.
Okay.
They call a slow burn is a filmmaking style, usually in narrative productions, wherein plot, action, and scenes develop slowly, methodically towards a usually explosive ending.
Okay.
And so what I would like to add upon that is I think that slow burn movies are typically builders.
Sure.
They are. It's not just for horror movies.
Yeah.
Like, most romance films are slow burners. Don't kiss until the final scene. You
Gotta have
like
foreplay.
all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that exactly, Liz. It's all about the foreplay, and then
Foreplay, it's mullets.
and then you
We
get
are
the
gonna-
It's
and the
business
happy-
up front,
and the
party in the
happy
Yeah.
ending. So and
Family-friendly podcast.
I guess. Okay.
We're off the rails.
Yep.
Okay.
So and nice timing because comedies, it's in the variants. Typically, if they construct a joke that pays off multiple times,
Right.
or if the punchlines are usually it's the drier, more satire kind of comedies, and not
Yeah.
and not the Farrelly Brothers kind of
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your face, bang 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 kind of things.
Sure.
So they do that. Mysteries are dependent upon the slow burn.
In large part, yeah.
Because you want to lay out your clues, you want to set up the premises, you want to send in your false hooks and your MacGuffins, and then you have your big reveal,
Right.
And that's why you never. It's like mysteries. Don't spoil the ending, right? Classic. Spoiler alerts are definitely fall within the domain of slow burn horror.
They can, yeah.
They can, and almost no action movies are slow burners. I would say
True.
Well,
that was the biggest problem I had when I went and started to do the research, is that all these slow burn lists basically put every single horror movie in the slow burn category unless it had an action element. So it was like The Shining is a slow burn movie. The Exorcist is a slow burn movie. Psycho's a slow burn movie. And I was like, yeah, I guess. Sort of, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to stretch it that far, you could pretty much damn near put any single horror film under the slow burn category. I don't quite see it that way.
Well, I think you remove your franchise horrors. You remove them because they have very much a quick fix feel.
Sure.
Your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Streets. Where it's like kill, and then and then there's like jump scares and
coming to the denouement and like having something kind of bigger happen at the end is like some movies do that, but they're still not slow burn. Like I'm thinking like Scream or almost anything, where like there's a big payoff at the end, but there's still been much more action. I think when we think slow burn, it is methodical. It is actually slow. You're getting piece by piece by piece. And for some people, I don't know if any of us, I don't think are going to talk about Audition, which is like the granddaddy of all slow burn movies.
Yes.
That is almost 2 hours before you get, or I'd say an hour and a half before you get, what was that? With the thing in the bag of like, okay, I'm intrigued. But there are probably some people who have turned that movie off saying, I can't sit through this.
Yeah, I'm not waiting for it.
Kind of rom-com to wait for it. The payoff can't be big enough. Yet in that movie.
It is massive.
It is. Yeah.
Well, Liz, you hit the nail on the head. That's the one thing that I really focused on is the slow part of slow burn. Like, because for me that's where I calibrated my definition. It's got to be a fundamentally slow movie.
Yep.
So I took the literal definition of slow burn and pulled out the slow and focused on those films. I do have a couple of films that I'm going to be talking about that do not have the denouement. There is no crash at the end. There's no nothing.
It whittles away and sort of trails off into the distance. I mean, that's and that's why I think the definition that I read said usually explosive ending.
Yeah.
And I also said slow burn isn't just about the pace,
right?
Because it's gotta have that the pace, and usually it's a decision in the script or in the direction of the film that the pacing that you that even in the acting. I mean, there's a lot of story arcs are important. Character development is important, and it's part of the term that goes around nowadays where they say elevated horror, which is always one of those a bit problematic because it's saying if you're not an elevated horror movie or you're not a smart horror movie. No, it's but these types of movies of recent vintage really try and go for heavy on script, heavy on character. Like classic thing is Hereditary, and Midsommar. Right?
Yeah,
a lot of people they show up on a lot of slow burn lists,
and I don't think either one of those are slow burn movies.
I think Hereditary much more than Midsommar.
Sure,
I would have said the opposite.
Yeah,
really?
Because but it's.
I mean, there is a suicide in the first 5 minutes of.
Yeah, that's true, which is fairly dramatic. And then there's the Charlie versus the telephone pole,
right?
Yeah,
which is a key moment. But I don't think that just because you're a slow burn movie doesn't mean you have peaks.
Sure.
In the middle of the film, you just don't draw you don't draw. It's not dependent on punch, big right hook. It's
right.
It's which is like the franchise. Horror kind of method of you set up your characters to die and you kill them off and you don't have to develop them because you're not going to see them very long.
Right.
And it's about the fun and more about the sort of the let's pick up the pace and have some popcorn. Right.
That said, I hate the term elevated horror because I think it's pretty pompous and it sort of separates. It tries to separate itself out in this other sort of better category from all other horror. And I'm like, no,
Right.
elevated horror is a horrible term.
But it's a term.
I know people are using it,
It has a potential to be ending up like woke, right? Where I think
sure.
that all of a sudden that the opponents or
elevated horror is the woke of the horror world.
Well, I mean,
But if you have no guilty pleasures, then everything is at the same baseline.
yes,
Right.
I can love Broken Lizard's Club Dread, and I can also love Hereditary at the same amount and watch them back to back. It's
That's
okay.
right.
Toxic
That's right.
Avenger is not a slow burn.
No.
No.
All right, but let's get
All right,
in. Let's get into slow burn.
What is a slow burn?
Eric, since you I think have probably the most sophisticated and refined and elevated
Thank you.
Haircut now.
Yes.
understanding of this term.
It says the haircut. I haven't actually showered yet because I was working on my notes. I am going with perhaps the slowest of the slow burners.
Okay.
But it's also a movie that I like very much. We've talked about it at least once before on Best Moms.
Ooh.
This is A Dark Song.
Oh yeah.
Prior to recording, we would have had a collision.
Right.
But
Oh.
Eric and I already talked
we
about
kept
it.
Oh,
'cause I
we
agree.
have a collision.
Oh, you said with Mike
we would've
also.
had a
Yeah.
three-way collision.
I put Dark Song on this
Okay.
list, and it was because Eric said, "Hey, I just saw this movie called Dark Song. You gotta see this. It's really incredible. It's totally up your alley."
Yeah, and it is.
And I did.
Wait, my
super
alley
slow.
is spending an hour doing bizarre rituals.
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
like
that's right.
cantankerous,
You know.
Yeah.
black priest. Okay, whatever.
And I think that it's, as I was mentioning before, there's a lot of mystery to this because you're not sure whether it's all about the character development between two people, and then
Right.
the reveals about who they are and why they.
Well, give us the quick
why they're
sketch.
doing it.
Give us
Okay.
the quick sketch so we
So-
understand what the dynamic between those two people is.
So, A Dark Song is about a grieving mother, Sophia, played by Catherine Walker, who is determined to make contact with her recently deceased son, and she's gone to a medium to try and summon his spirit, a man named Joseph, played by Steve Oram. And much of the movie has Sophia attempting to follow the wonderfully cantankerous Joseph's ritual direction, some of them quite disgusting, and finding herself, like the audience, wondering if this guy's for real or not.
Oh, Joseph is an a-hole.
Yeah, he is.
He's horrible.
But
he's a horrible human being.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call. I wouldn't.
I thought I like
cantankerous is too nice of a word.
so yeah okay so wonderfully asshole-ish.
There
Joseph.
you go.
Yeah.
But little by little, we begin to sense that maybe the ritual is working, and unlike movies from, say, like the Evil Dead, not a
Right.
slow burner,
No,
or Beetlejuice, not a slow burner.
Right.
Those are instant, like say the words out of a book, and it's like Beetlejuice, and it's like ta-da, ritual. No,
Right.
this is
This is like
weeks in the
weeks.
making, and
No, it's
slow-
months.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. No. It takes place over the course of months.
And part of that is it heavily features the idea of you screwed something up, now you have to do it all over again, which will elicit a collective groan from both Carol and the audience.
Right. Oh
It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
shit, now I should do it again. But in its own way, it invests you, and it makes you in it to win it, to get to the finish line, and the level of trust that you have in Joseph, particularly about the act of N2, you're going, what's going to happen here? They do give you a big
Right.
reveal.
And I think it's less about her trust in Joseph as much as it is her revealing to him that her whole play here is
Motivations.
Yeah, her motivation is so
Right.
incredibly strong. She's like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Doesn't even matter.
Right.
As a mom,
there
and
is
that's the real draw.
I think without spoiling anything, you could say that there is a revenge motive
Yeah.
that gets revealed.
That's what I was talking
in the middle,
about.
in the middle of the film.
Yep.
And it also changes your perspective on Sophia.
Right.
Because before she was just a grieving mother. Now she's there's a
A more fully drawn character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's a great movie.
100%.
so
Liam
good.
Gavin, the guy who directed it, he did very little else. The only other thing he's done is like an episode or two of the Bly Manor. That's kind of about.
Okay.
He's acted in a bunch of stuff. I mean, so he's in the industry, but he has not directed a ton of stuff.
I don't know that this movie.
I think it's a great movie. Yeah. I really do.
It is, but this is one of those ones that comes with a caveat. You better like slow burn movies.
Oh yeah. You gotta.
You have to have faith in this director, because this is one of those ones you might say, like, all right, maybe I'm going to turn this off. I don't know, like, how worth it is it? Because this is a slow burn.
And even
totally worth it.
Because the intricacies of the rituals, and it follows, and it shows, and it's not just like, okay, place the salt in this, and then we'll move on to the next thing. They show her going, methodically placing everything and doing everything that he's saying. So you're taking part of the ritual with her, and it's earned, right? Mm-hmm. But it's all about that ritual. Mm-hmm. And in some movies the ritual is 5 minutes of the movie. This is 90 minutes of ritual.
I liked Scott Weinberg of The Nerdist. Mm-hmm. His assessment of it was two complete strangers cutting themselves off in the world, cutting themselves off from the world inside a dilapidated mansion. That's already a movie I want to see. But once a Dark Song starts delving into issues like love, lost faith, and natural human reaction to a sudden tragedy, that's when it blossoms from a novel concept to a truly powerful piece of genre filmmaking. Yeah. Good job, Scott Weinberg. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Yes. Stick around for the end is all I gotta say.
Yeah, because
it's a weird one that I still am scratching my head over.
Same thing. It has a massive. It takes this little quiet plot and then kind of explodes with it but not in a. It's you just have to experience it because it's not expected.
Yep. All right, Liz, what do you have next?
Okay, I have classified my 3 picks in levels of how WTF the ending is. So I'll start with my first one. And like we said, the slow burn doesn't always have to just be super slow. It's a pacing of the plot. It's a building. Mm-hmm. So Dylan Roth, the critic for The Observer, said of this film, "It's an unapologetically weird film, an anxiety engine that tightens like the spring of a wind-up toy for 100 minutes without ever slowing down or letting go." And this is 2022's Resurrection.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Starring my queen, Rebecca Hall, directed by Andrew Siemens. Now, when we saw this at Overlook, we all kind of came out saying, oh, this is like a 3. I could not stop thinking about this film. I have since rewatched it, and it made it on my favorite of last year, my top 10 list of last year.
Yeah.
Prominently for Rebecca Hall's performance, also for Tim Roth, and for exactly how freaking weird this film is. And even though it's definitely fits our slow burn category and has quite a wallop at the end, I still would change the ending.
Oh,
so
I would
like
too.
the ending, but I would still change it ever so slightly. So I'm not going to spoil this, but Resurrection is a film about Margaret, who is a successful businesswoman and single mom, to Abby, who is a 17-year-old about to turn 18 and leave for college.
Less successful about being a mom.
Yeah, seriously. But her daughter's kind of.
She's got a little parenting trauma.
She does. And she's sleeping with one of her married coworkers, but she's just kind of looks like this tough broad. The film opens where she's listening to an intern talk about her boyfriend treating her badly, and she's like, well, you got to do this. You got to leave. You got to say this. Turns out she's had some experience in this, situation, because she goes to a business conference and sees across the room Tim Roth, and she freaks out and literally runs out of this place. Turns out that when she was 18 years old, she was in a very, very weird and abusive relationship with Tim Roth. They had a child together. The child I'm going to say in air quotes, disappears. She says, what happens to my baby? And he says, I ate him all up.
Yeah.
And he comes back 22
It's
years
in my
later
belly.
saying, the baby's still here and it's in my belly. So if that doesn't sound weird enough to you, don't worry. It gets weirder through the movie. And this one is like a mullet. It starts, short in the front. It gets to go longer and longer and longer in the back. And then whenever someone says there's a mystical baby in my belly, you know that baby's coming out somehow. So there's your party. So this was directed by Andrew Siemens, who has just done a few other films, neither of them horror. He had done The Duchess with Keira Knightley and then another film. But I strongly recommend this for people who they're not going to be super gore hounds. It is gory and visceral at the very end, but if you like stuff weird and you like stunning performances, Rebecca Hall, Tim Roth, both of them are amazing. And if you're voting the Fangoria Awards this year, you can vote for Rebecca Hall.
Already did.
Yep.
Already did for the Chainsaw Awards.
My ballot has been cast.
Mine has too, and I voted for that specific movie.
Sweet.
Needless to say, Rebecca Hall will be on the ballot for the Thingy Awards, which should be coming out
100%.
fairly soon. So
Yeah.
I've got to get working on the nominations because I'd like to be able to release that about the same time that the Oscars drop.
You know what I thought was so great about this is that she's painted very early on in the film as this hyper successful, very competitive runner. But then as you get into the film, everything around her, all of her relationships, they're just in complete tatters. Everything falls apart around her, which is really fascinating to see how large a false facade that she's really presenting, and that she has all of this Tim Roth based trauma sitting right underneath her, and she's getting a lot of credit for her incredible performance. Not a lot of people are talking about Tim Roth, but I think his performance is also pretty goddamn amazing.
He's operating in the weirdo zone in a very unsettling way.
He looks very comfortable in the weirdo zone.
Oh yes, he does.
And I was this close to actually doing Rebecca Hall's other big horror movie from The Night House, which I thought she deserved. She got Tony Colletted.
Yeah.
Didn't get the respect that I think any other genre would have gotten for a performance like she gave.
I count that also as a slow burn.
It
so
is.
You could have a Rebecca Hall slow burn evening.
Yeah.
Slow burn-a-thon.
But I think we talked a bunch about Night House before, so I picked other films, but both Resurrection and A Night House or The Night House show a woman who's got sort of a really tough, powerful armored shell, but once it breaks, she's got a lot of vulnerabilities.
Oh
and, I think that she really succeeds in that. Because I think also physically she's tall and commanding as a physical presence.
Yep.
Not your classic leading lady.
It takes nothing for her to break, which is another thing where you see. I mean, one look across the room, she's already a little bit on the edge with the daughter getting ready to, empty nest her. But one sighting of Tim Roth, and she's broken.
Yeah. But you also get the feeling that if you asked her to, like, as an actress, like, okay, break into the flop sweats, she could just do it on command.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That she can go from giving powerful, stern lecture to a underling, and being the boss, to being a little girl.
Crumpling in the fetal position. Yeah. All right. Since Eric and I collided, my next film is a 1989 experimental film written, produced, edited, shot, and directed by E. Elias Merhige. I had read a Fangoria article this past year called Still Not of This World, 30 Years of E. Elias Merhige, Begotten, about the development of the social celluloid impact on the hyper artsy filmed.
Is this a horror movie?
Begotten. So as I poured over the article, I thought to myself, okay, A, you're a completist, so you have to see this.
Right.
B, you're a horror podcaster, so there's nothing too scary. C, Fangoria says you should see it as a horror film. And D, who doesn't love to occasionally take that bridge too
Indonesia?
far?
Isn't this one hard to find, though?
Super hard to find.
There you go, audience.
Okay.
It's an American film. He's he's a New York director. It is a
And
very
this is like a culty, like one of those I saw this movies.
Yes,
right?
yes. There's no dialogue, and it basically has a style similar to a lot of early silent films, but there's nothing that's fonted on the screen. It's got this incredibly enigmatic plot that basically involves all of these various creation myths that opens with the suicide of a godlike figure and then the births of Mother Earth and the Son of Earth, who set out on a journey of death and rebirth through a barren landscape. It is, I'm here to tell you, I've seen a lot of weird stuff in my day. This is definitely at the top of the list because, as I say, there's no dialogue. There's nothing that's fonted on the screen. You can barely make out the images. It looks like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy that you're watching. There's very little. It's not music per se as much as it is noise that's in the background. But the whole thing taken together collectively, I think Fangoria is right to point out that it is just as disturbing as you could possibly get. In many ways, even though Skinamarink has this year's Skinamarink has actually has dialogue, barely audible. It actually has a plot, sort of. This doesn't really have any of those things, and many art historians have talked about the film's allegorical qualities, death, rebirth, life, etc., and the sort of that the director purposely made the film as ambiguous as possible so that it would invite like lots of different interpretations. It's an incredible film, and I think the reason why it's incredible is the guy, the director, whose name I am absolutely butchering. He was originally a special effects designer for a bunch of different companies, including Disney. He worked for Disney for a while, and he was doing a lot of rotoscope ideas, and so this gave him a lot of the decayed visual look behind the film. So he wanted it to look like it was a film that was purposely damaged or had been degraded like over the history of time. And so it's at best, it's like a nightmarish dream. At worst, it's almost unwatchable. But this is what I will say, and I didn't even say this about.
But I loved it.
I thought
it nightmarish dream.
Intellectually.
Yeah. I said, if you ever want to crawl inside a Rorschach test, then this is your chance.
I recently saw Mad God.
Yeah, right.
Which 100% dialogue free.
Yeah,
jammed full of, and I think that was one where it was Phil Tippett, the special effects god, created his own sort of gods and had them do weird stuff, almost incomprehensible stuff, just amazing to look at. But at least there was a path of travel. There was no plot really, but there was, at least you could sort of see, and there was no narrative, but it was a linked story of images that would blend it from one to the next. And it sounds like this one's almost completely, it has much more of random hits.
It's void of plot, narrative, and any sort of clear through line. But the one thing I totally forgot to mention at the beginning of Slow Burn is I think with all these films, at least for me, I have to put the iPhone away. I have to turn the computer off. I have to get a cup of coffee. I have to pay attention and make sure that I am blocked out for an hour and a half, because otherwise, it's very easy to walk away from these films. The only thing that kept me going with this film was I had to pay a $100 deposit at Movie Madness to get a VHS copy.
So this is a bit of an intellectual exercise for a bit of our audience here who probably does not have access to this movie. At least you know about it.
You can find some
online.
on
Yes,
YouTube
you can.
and
Yeah. But he did go on to direct Shadow of the Vampire in
yeah.
2000, and he also directed Suspect Zero in 2004. He hasn't done a whole heck of a lot since then, but he has done. He has done a series of things, but he's very enigmatic. Very much in the same vein as Twin Peaks.
David
David
Lynch.
Lynch.
David Lynch, yeah, very much in the same vein.
Eraserhead is
yeah.
very much a slow burn movie.
Sure.
Did
All right.
you happen to write down in your notes what issue of Fangoria you read about that in?
It would have been, I think it was last spring, last summer.
Okay.
Yeah. But there is a review. I did do a review of Begotten up on the Scariest Things website, Scariest Things 1T. Check it out. You can take a deeper dive into my ramblings about this, as Eric put it, intellectual exercise into horror.
All right. So my next one is a very recent one, and in fact, I posted a review for it, and it almost made my top 10 from last year. But this is a movie that requires a lot of patience out of the audience.
Ooh.
Again, grab a cup of coffee.
I got it. I'm there.
But this is You Won't Be Alone, directed by Goran Stolevsky, starring Sarah Kimoska, Anna Maria Marinka, Numi Rapace, a familiar name, Carlo Cota, and Alice Englert. Now, the reason why you may not recognize a number of those names is a lot of them are Slavic actors from Serbia and Macedonia.
I was going to say, are you flexing your Eastern European
that's my
pronunciation?
Heritage. I'm half Serbian. I don't know if you knew that or not. No. There are a number of slow burn period piece witch movies out there, right?
Oh,
We've talked about them. The most famous of which, of course, is The Witch. No doubt a slow burner.
Yeah.
And Hagazusa.
Yeah.
Real slow burn. Somber, quiet, medieval witch tale. And now You Won't Be Alone joins this, sort of forms a sort of a trio. And this movie has a philosophical bent to it, which is different than the other two. Because I think all three of these movies try and say something beyond just the fact that it's a witch.
What's it called again?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You Won't Be Alone.
You Won't Be Alone. Okay, right.
This is a good one.
And it's also a highly unusual story or philosophy behind this, which is it uses horror as what is the nature of humanity. Mm-hmm. You Won't Be Alone takes place in 19th century Macedonia, which for all intents and purposes looks like 12th century Macedonia. It's rather remarkable how isolated the Balkans are.
Yeah.
Right? This is it. I didn't know it was 19th century. It felt like it came out at the time of Haggis. I thought it was like medieval.
Yeah, like 1500s. Yeah,
right.
that's what I thought.
But I think if you think about it, in the early 1800s, they were still using. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have it was very agrarian, and this is one of the most isolated sections of Europe. Although I think this is at the time when Napoleon was on the march, but these people were just off in the backwaters. It covers the story of a young witch, Nevena, who is cursed as a baby by the claw of Maria, the wolf eateress.
The Wolf Eateress. Why is that not a metal band? Wolf Eateress.
She would look great as a banner on a metal album cover. She's an old scarred crone who survived, and I put survived in question marks. Like, she may have died and she may have been resurrected as a witch. But the local townsfolk put her to the stake.
Ooh.
And she had come back, and she's got these claws, and she nicked baby Nevena, rendering the baby mute.
Purposefully?
Yes.
Okay.
That was her mark, saying, "I want this baby is mine. You
Gotcha.
owe me."
Yeah.
And they go, "No," and so the mother of the baby sequesters the baby in a cave for her entire childhood. And so she has no contact with the outside world, thinking that she can hide the baby from the witch.
Right.
Mistake. Maria comes back, claims the baby, kills the mom, and takes the teenage girl to teach her how to be a proper witch. The Nevena when upon the curse is no longer human.
Right.
Okay, but she is also a teenager.
Ooh.
And she's not Sabrina the teenage
I was
witch.
just gonna say, a la Bewitched.
She
She's
is
Sabrina the Macedonian.
She's Sabrina the 19th century Macedonian witch, and it is the kind of thing where everything to her is new because she grew up in what happened. You grew up in a cave,
Right?
Yes, she grew up in a cave,
Right.
Like, literally, yes.
And but she doesn't want to do. She also doesn't. It's like you're not my mom,
Right.
You know, kind of thing. Well, not quite in that terms.
Sure.
It's very quiet.
Yeah.
And spoken in Slavic,
Yeah.
Macedonian. So, but there is definitely a sense that Maria thought this was going to be an easier job of raising this teenager, and
Even witches can't deal with teenage girls.
right. And so they get into an argument and a fight, and Nevena rushes out to the nearby village to go check it out. But she didn't go out there completely unprepared. She learned this really creative trick from Maria, which is she's a shapeshifter. And you do it, 1, kill your victim. 2, take a chunk of the victim's flesh and jam it into this strange pouch that they both have in their shoulder. And so it's like a chunk of meat or some guts, and they sort of stuff it in and patch it in, and then they become they become a duplicate of the victim. It's a little unclear as to what happens to the victim.
Sure.
They did.
Yeah. So it's pretty handy. And so when she has no idea about what are all these people doing. It's a small farming village. So the kinds of questions this brings up: what does it mean to belong to a community? What's it like being a dog? What is a joke? What is it like being a beaten woman? What is it like to be the village idiot? What is the value of a hard day of work in the field? What is sex like from a woman's perspective?
Huh.
What is sex like from a man's perspective? What is fear? What does it mean to have a child? And most importantly, is it worth being human?
Is there anything it doesn't cover?
It is. I think, it asks big questions.
Like a lot of big questions.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
And but the movie, as I said, it's got a languid pace that matches the unrushed life of a 19th century subsistence
Macedonian
farmer. Right. And
Macedonian witch.
it also
Mimi
seems like
Rapace is amazing in this.
yeah, she was.
Because she learns the language. And
Yeah.
speaks.
Wow.
She's Swedish.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And she can speak English, but she learned. She also plays.
Or Norwegian.
She's she's mute, right? Because the baby was, but she does not but she doesn't act like the woman who she killed because she's not that woman. But they all figure it's like, oh, that's what happens when the husband beats her so much. She just goes stupid.
Right.
And
and
eventually she, there's actually 4 actors who play Nevena.
Okay.
And a dog.
Right.
And it, it is the ultimate character arc movie because she gets to play so many perspectives. Maria is sort of will come back and pay visit to her and say, these humans do not care for you. You're mine. And she goes, no, I'm not. I'm she's beginning to cobble together rudimentary language, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But in the end, it's really about whether the human experience worked for her or not.
Uh-huh.
So again, kind of like you were saying, there's no explosive ending to this one.
Okay.
There's a good ending.
Sure.
There's an ending because it answers the question of, is it worth being a human? What does she decide to after going through everything that she's gone through, everything that she's experienced?
So it does answer
views.
some of these larger philosophical questions.
Right. And then it closes out with
all right,
her and Maria and the decision that she makes.
Okay.
So terrific story, sweeping visuals.
Yeah.
Because there's times like there are moments where I could just watch when the men go out and they're harvesting the wheat and they're just threshing it with scythes. And there's like there's clouds in the background and the beaming sun, and you just get it's almost like watching a 19th century documentary.
Huh.
And and she, or in this case, when in that time, he's watching and he's trying to learn by mimicking them, or when they're dancing, or when they're doing all these kinds of things. It's oddly kind of this sweet bit, and then she goes and murders somebody else and takes over their body, right? So if you engage with it, it's great.
All right.
It takes it.
Sign me up.
You've got to
I'm
be
gonna
into
see
slow
it.
burn, though.
All right, Liz, what is next
Okay.
on your list?
My next film is going to be an example of where you do have a little bit of action at the beginning, but that doesn't even hit the amount of the end. Party is in the back. So this is like a Mullet with like 80s mall bangs. You got a little fun front and end. So this film, Sarah Michelle Fetters from MovieFreak.com says, I was on pins and needles throughout.
Ooh.
The climax showcasing a hush ominousness that left me quietly shattered into a million teeny tiny pieces. And Mike of The Scariest Things gave this movie a 5 out of 5 stars and said,
Mike never gives 5-star movies.
2017 gave us Get Out. 2018 gave us Hereditary, and 2019's deep dive into intellectual terror is The Lodge.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I
Lodge.
occasionally do give a 5-star.
Yes, and I 100% agree, and I think Eric agreed.
Yep.
We all
Yep.
walked out of this film shattered into a million teeny tiny little pieces, just like that other critic.
Stunned and depressed, but impressed.
Ooh, but impressed. Okay, so this is the 2019 film directed by aunt and nephew directing team Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. It stars Riley Keough, Jaden Martell, who is the kid who played Bill in It, Leah McHugh, and the Alicia Silverstone for a small amount of time. And
Who was
Star
in
of the Requiem.
Who was in a little film called The
Star of the
Requiem?
Requiem. The
No big
Requiem's,
deal.
Alicia
No big deal.
Silverstone.
Good job, Alicia.
So this follows a soon-to-be stepmother, played by Riley Keough, who is left alone with her fiance's 2 children at their like winter house during Christmas and a snowstorm when her fiance and their dad leaves to go back into the city. She is a survivor of a death cult, and these kids have recently lost their mother and are not super psyched to be getting a new stepmother. So as this movie unfolds, Riley Keough, her character Grace, begins to, you watch her like mental breakdown as you are seeing what the children are doing to her, which is a little bit of pranks. But unfortunately, what happens is you are watching tables turn, motives shift, your alliances shift throughout the film, and you are left with one big stunner of a depressing but amazing ending.
Yeah. It was
All of the above.
Like,
All of the above.
don't tease crazy people.
No.
Do not
Do
mess
not.
with,
Do not tease crazy Christian white nationalists.
cult
survivors.
Cult survivors. This movie is like soul crushing.
It
but
is.
Jesus, it's so good. It's so good. This is like one of those perfect kind of movies for me.
Everybody has a big sweeping character arc. All the main, but the little kids, and
I think one of the most devastating parts of the film is when the boyfriend is essentially says, "Hey, I got to go back into the city, so I'm going to leave you here with the kids." And there's
the dog,
and there's like
There's
a storm coming, but
You'll be fine.
the kids hate you, but you'll figure it out. It's cool.
You'll be fine.
I was just like, "Oh man, that's a lot to ask."
That is a bad idea. And there's no arbiter, and
No.
and it's not like she doesn't try and make good with the kids. The kids just don't trust her.
Right.
Just giving her a
because
break.
you learn they have just lost their mom and you experience their trauma
in a
with
brutal,
that too.
yeah,
They
awful
are not
way to lose a mom.
excited about this girl. So
Yeah.
but this is a slow burn that really, really, really packs a punch at the end.
Fantastic
This is
motivations for all characters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
This is not one where, like, yes, put your phone down and pay attention, but this does have a steadily building. It's paced really, really well. So yes, while it is slow, it's never ever boring, and you're never want to turn off this one. You are like, what is going to happen next? What is going to happen next? They build dread so well, and this team is the team that brought us Goodnight Mommy, another slow burn with a walloping ending.
Yep. Have you gone back and
what they're doing.
rewatched The Lodge, Liz?
probably seen The Lodge twice.
Okay.
Not recently, though.
I've never
But
watched
now
it
I might
again.
have to.
I have a feeling
It's just like-
the Lodge maybe
Emotional. Yeah.
would have.
It's a one and doneer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the movies that we probably don't need to see again.
Yeah.
That one.
Put The Lodge on that list.
That
But
one
this is
stomps
one
on
that-
your heart.
Yeah. Oh
Why
my
I
gosh.
like it is because there are, like Hereditary, like
Mhm.
St. Maud, like the ones that I'm drawn to.
Mhm.
I've got from the first one, you're devastated. You're like, oh my God, what just happened? Then I want to go back and be able to pick it apart.
Yeah.
And be able
Oh
to look
yeah.
closer
Sure.
and say like, oh wait, I missed this part. That's what a slow burn is actually really, really good for.
100%, Liz. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
love it.
because they, as I described it before, they're builders,
Yeah.
and they layer and they
But each
give you
piece is like a good mystery, like
Right.
you had mentioned. You have to have each piece to get to the end. In an action movie or a slasher, stack up the characters and let the bodies fall. This one, each little piece, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine. So
Mm-hmm.
I love to be able to go back and check it out again, no
And-
matter how depressing.
And bodies do fall.
Yep.
Bodies do fall.
All right. My last film of the night is the very first review I ever did on the Scariest Things website back in 2018, early 2018, when Eric said, yeah, we're doing reviews, so figure it out. And I was like, wait, what? What's happening? I thought we were just doing a podcast. This is a film that also had its premiere at the Overlook Film Festival at Timberline Lodge in 2017. This A24 film is It Comes at Night.
Yes,
Oh,
this is a good
yeah.
one. Good
Al-
choice.
Also starring Riley Keough. Yeah.
Hey,
That's right.
All right.
Rest in peace,
yeah.
Lisa Marie. This I really liked because this film to me in a lot of ways feels like the inverse of the Jim Halpert films, in that those were so largely focused.
Quiet
Means a
Place.
Quiet Place.
Quiet Place.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, sorry for those. Yes, those of you who don't know who Jim Halpert is
Yeah.
or what films he's
Krasinski.
directed. Yes, John Krasinski. A Quiet Place it seems very internally focused around the family, right, and the family dynamic, and it's that emotional draw that makes it so great. This one is very much externally focused, right? It's all about sort of the distrust of your fellow man, and that's what makes this film so interesting. It is obviously a character-driven flick, but the thing that is really interesting about it is this was, of course, 2017, about 3 years prior to the pandemic, and it is effectively about the pandemic and how people can be driven so crazy so quickly. But each of the characters in the film sort of uses the daily routine as their survival and coping mechanism in their own sort of self-made dystopian society, right? They're having to cope with all these things, and anytime there's an external inject into their very insular worlds, they all kind of the whole family kind of freaks out. Obviously, taken together, It Comes at Night is really a metaphor for our societal woes. You know, the inability to trust each other, the uncaring way that I think we all take on a lot of these stovepiped information that we're like constantly fed. But the thing that I thought was really interesting, and I think at the time kind of troubled me a little bit, is that it's largely devoid of any real exposition, and there's not a lot of real discussion, and it sort of weirdly never answers the question, what comes at night? So, yeah, spoiler alert, if you're looking for a lot of answers, it doesn't really give it to you. And it doesn't also, there's definitely an interesting end to it, but it doesn't really ever come to an explosive ending. Interestingly, the director, Trey Edward Schultz, he cited the work of Paul Thomas Anderson, John Cassavetes, The Night of the Living Dead and The Shining as inspirations for the film. And specifically, I thought this was really interesting because the film takes on influences from The Shining's Overlook Hotel because the layout of the house that they're in is like particularly vague and it's never really properly established. So every time you're moving around the house, you're like, I don't know where the hell I am. And this house is so...
It's a labyrinth.
It's a labyrinth and it's so weirdly laid out. How is this even possible? That was all very much by design, based on his hot take on The Shining. So still, I think it's a great film. It was a film that, I think they shot for about $2 million and it grossed like $20 million. So that's a pretty goddamn good return on your investment. And it also shows the power of being able to put together a pretty interesting and compelling story and not having to spend a ton of money in doing so.
I think it took a bit of heat from some horror fans who really wanted to know what comes at night.
What comes right.
And then some people, you'll see some reviews they get kind of snarky and they go, nothing comes at night.
That's exactly what I said in my review.
Okay,
yeah.
I was that
snarky. I was that snarky horror fan.
But I think it's more impressive now post-pandemic because it's a bit prescient.
Maybe.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. And you see how A, quickly things break down, and B, how man is willing to turn against man like at the drop of a hat.
Yeah,
to protect their family.
Holding off, it's like getting people away from spitting distance of you, and it's like we all went through it. You hold up. You went into defense mode, and it's fascinating now.
Yeah.
It
All right.
comes at night, not to be confused with Night Comes for Us. It's
No.
the opposite of a slow burn.
No.
Right.
The most violent martial arts film I've ever seen in my life.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to the Wayback Machine.
Woo!
This is a 1965
Get in the
movie.
DeLorean.
Oh.
This is Roman Polanski's Repulsion, starring Catherine Deneuve,
yes.
Ian Hendry, and John Fraser.
I thought you were going to say Dementia 13.
I could have gone there too.
I actually just watched that.
Yeah, no, that's Dementia 13. Coppola.
Yeah,
right. I mean, you're talking about two masters here.
Yeah.
I could have picked that one too, but this was the one that's really kind of, I think for me, and I'll just go into this. So this is a cold depiction of the isolating qualities of schizophrenia and paranoia. This is Polanski's second English language film. And it is one of the key button-pushing films that brought down the Hays Code. This is, along with, I think, Black Sunday, Psycho, Peeping Tom, and probably Bucket of Blood. This is notably, it's the Europeans who really turned horror into serious adult fare in the 60s and gave real, honest scares and fears as opposed to Rubber Monster coming and crashing the beach party.
Yep.
Right. So Catherine Deneuve plays Carole Ledoux, a Belgian manicurist working in London. Deneuve, being one of the great beauties of filmdom, she's not lacking in suitors. And Carole is, however, deathly afraid of men. She lives in daily fear of being assaulted and will not let any man get close to her, to the point of nausea and sickness. She lives with her sister Helen in a London flat, who has a relationship with a married man, Michael, who brings out all sorts of passive-aggressive behavior in Carole, like he would leave his razor and his toothbrush in the bathroom, and she'd throw them away, and then they'd be having sex in the next room, and she would be she couldn't sleep, she'd just get agitated to no end. So it kind of fascinates her, but she's also repulsed by the nature of contact with men. So thus repulsion, right? But things at that point, it takes a little while to get here, but eventually Helen and Michael leave for Italy for a vacation, partly because they want to go away, and partly because Michael just can't stand her, right? Just like, your sister's too weird, I can't deal with her, let's go on a trip. So leaving crazy Carole alone in the flat to allow her mania to intensify. Hallucinations ensue, and she shuts herself in, and her life spirals into an Ouroboros, look up that word, of consuming madness. That's the snake eating its own tail. Right? Every stranger.
Thank you. I was actually just looking that up.
Every stranger is a potential rapist. Every male acquaintance is not to be trusted. She butchers and abandons a rabbit out in the kitchen, allowing it to rot in the kitchen. Immense cracks appear in the apartment, or do they? Not so subtle reflection upon her own mental state.
Right.
And speaking of reflections, strange men appear in the mirror who aren't really there. And in one of the all-time great visual treats to the era, during the big third act close, the hallway in her apartment erupts with arms that reach out and try to grope
that's
her.
right. That's right.
This is another layer-by-layer builder of one symptom on top of a previous symptom. So what starts out as a bit of a neuroses and like passive-aggressive tics and sort of a general shyness and an aversion, it becomes full-blown madhouse for her. I think Deneuve says very little, but she completely sells Carol as a woman on the brink and then fully off the brink, plummeting into the abyss of schizophrenia. You really can't get close to this movie because Carol won't let you.
Yeah.
Movie has a way of strangling the audience as you really can't root for her, and you can't help her, but you completely sympathize with their plight. It's a weird, kind of a relationship that you have with them, and I think Eric's rule number one: do you care about the protagonist? That's a big maybe, right? I mean, she's a fascinating character, but she's almost she.
You're more invested in knowing whether she's crazy or not.
Well, no, she's crazy.
Oh, okay.
You completely know, but can she get help?
Right.
Can anything?
Okay. Well,
anything bring her back?
Sure.
I think her sister's selfishness, and I suppose selfishness is strong because she allows her sister Carol to live with her, but Helen doesn't really try hard to assist, and but things don't really kind of escalate until they're gone.
Yep.
So, and by that point, it's like, yeah, she's kind of weird, and she has some weird tics, and I wish she'd like my boyfriend better. But,
so, what do you give? What do you give Repulsion? Is this a 5 out of 5? Because this did not make the top 100.
No, I think it's a 4.5, maybe. I hold it back because it really is a bit off-putting.
Okay.
The third act is brutal.
Sure.
And it's everything that is described by the nature of the slow burn plays out here. Build, big payoff.
Yeah.
When she becomes violent, and and you don't see it in her initially.
Yeah.
But she becomes so scared, and that she reacts to anybody, and there's triggers. I mean, there's one guy who doesn't deserve it, one guy who does deserve it.
Right.
Whatever support systems Carol had either failed or she destroys. This is. To me, it felt like this was an A24 movie before A24 movies, right?
Roman Polanski is an artiste.
Yes,
he's also kind of a dirtbag potentially.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. I mean, I think there are some layers of irony about Repulsion and Polanski.
Yeah.
But
that's for another podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, my last slow burn film is an example of one that starts as an unassuming, almost horror comedy of errors and of manners, could be errors, and ends up in a place you will never see coming and you will never ever want to go. This is for anybody who's accepted an invitation and said, what's the worst that could happen? This is 2022's Speak No Evil. My number one last year. So, directed by Christian Tafdrup. This stars Morten Buren and Sissel Kosh as Bjorn and Louise, who with their daughter Agnes are a Danish family on vacation in Tuscany at a very small hotel. They make friends with another couple from the Netherlands named Patrick and Karen and their son Abel, who is not able to speak. And they instantly headed off while on vacation. A couple months later, the Danes receive a postcard from the Dutch asking them to come visit them. And they say, even though the wife is kind of like, no, that's going to be weird, the husband Bjorn is looking for a break, and he's like, "What's the worst that could happen? It'll be fine."
Well,
Ugh. What's the worst that could happen? There's no way they saw this coming. So upon arrival, the sleeping arrangements are not ideal for their group. They seem to have forgotten that Louise is a vegetarian, even though she's mentioned it a bunch of times. Patrick, who had said he was a doctor, turns out probably that wasn't true. And then they see why Abel really can't talk. And it's horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this film is 97 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say
that's how you do it.
that the plot twist or the big reveal happens at probably 80 minutes. So you've probably got 18 minutes of batshit crazy horror with a capital H. But that is prefaced by, an hour of just, this is very, very uncomfortable, but maybe we're laughing. Maybe it's just cultural differences. So this is the definition of a slow burn. And this is almost the two movies in one. So, God, I love this movie. I watched it again yesterday.
This is your number one movie of the year.
This is my number one movie of the year.
I think it ended up almost on everybody's top 10 slides.
It wasn't on mine because I hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Have you seen
it's
it yet?
good.
I have not seen it yet.
Oh.
Please get yourself to Shudder after the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
This will be...
Yeah,
this goes great with football.
Yeah,
this is the worst that can happen.
This will depress you right into slumber.
Ask a Chargers fan that question.
Yeah.
What's the worst could happen?
I am a Saints fan, and we all know what's the worst.
What I think is interesting about this film too is a lot of people gave it a lot of crap because they didn't buy sort of the cultural differences, and they didn't buy the.
I think that it's totally true, though. I think.
I do too. But a lot of people were frustrated by how kind and nice and just sort of willing to go with the flow the Danish family was. And then, of course, there's a critical scene where they have to go back to the house to pick up their daughter's stuffed animal, the stuffed animal, which a lot of people also said, no, you wouldn't do that. You would just, as a parent, you would just say,
we'll get you another one.
We'll get you another one. Rabbit. Don't worry about it. I was kind of torn by that as well because I've had both experiences there as a parent. Like I've said, no, we're not going back. That's a waste of time. Yeah. But I've also had the experience where I say, oh gosh, you know what? You're so emotionally attached to this thing. We'll go back. I'll do it for you. I'm a good dad. But I could see how people would be troubled with that because that really is a critical linchpin in the film.
Is that they go back.
Correct.
They touch on that earlier. They've gone back for that rabbit already.
Right.
That is almost when they meet the family. Or it is. Like they meet them at the dinner, but then they connect with them and have lunch when the dad is going back for that rabbit.
Don't underestimate the power of a stuffed animal.
So
now it's like, what's the worst that could happen? And then if your kid leaves the toy, tell them, screw the toy, we'll get you another one. Don't go back for the toy.
Okay, now as a point of reference for someone who has not seen the movie, were there enough warning signs where it said, fuck it, kid, we'll get you another one?
I think so.
Like, because it's like, it's dangerous, honey, and it's like, we really should. It's like, this is...
Although here's the...
You wouldn't do it if your life was in danger.
Discover the true danger until after they have gone back and then been convinced to stay.
Right.
Because... the other couple really is like, are they evil or are they just fucking weird? Like, and I don't know, Dutch. Like, and I think they all bond over like how weird the Swedes are. And after like watching the new series of The Kingdom, like that's a whole thing where like the Danish people like hate the Swedish people. So,
right.
I don't know.
But I think
you have to suspend a little disbelief. But as Americans, I don't know if we can really understand those cultural touchstones in Europe with everything being so close together. It's like us saying people from Texas, people from New Jersey, people from LA.
Right.
Although the common denominator, I think, which is an interesting one, and the dynamic between the Danish couple is the wife is a little bit high strung. And the husband is a little bit dismissive. And so, I've seen those dynamics before where the wife is just like always on edge and the husband's just like, oh, Jesus Christ.
Chill
like,
out.
just don't worry.
If this will get you to knock it off.
Right.
we'll go get the damn toy.
Exactly.
But and maybe this will pique Eric's interest. I would say that the ending is equally, if not more, devastating than the film we already previously mentioned, The Lodge.
Oh man,
Yeah.
It's got
I'd
it's that kind of a gut
got that
punch.
kind.
Yeah, and it is
Yeah.
a
So
incredible.
maybe watch it before the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I've got no
skin in the game.
skin in the game for the Super Bowl. So yeah, that's fine.
There are no Oregon
right.
Ducks playing in the Super Bowl this year. I already looked at the rosters.
Rihanna and concert.
Devin
Not-
Allen's on the
interrupted by
reserves.
football.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, Eric, get us out of here.
All right.
All right. Well, first I want to say once again thank you to Kelly Ledgerwood for
Thank you,
all
Kelly.
of your contributions. And for all of those of you who are listening who would also like to make a request at the bandstand, just
we'll
join
do
our,
it.
Join our Patreon community. It's cheap, and it goes to a good cause because it's the only we don't have many other ways of generating revenue.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that we would like to draw your attention to, if you're listening to us on our podcast channel, you should be aware of it already. But we now have YouTube weeklies out called Spooky Time.
Yeah.
And Spooky Time number 3 just dropped. And
Yes, indeed.
we talk about a number of things, and it gives us an opportunity to touch bases on things that we oftentimes don't get to talk as much about, like books and games and other things that are in upcoming events that don't neatly fall into one of our genre topics on our long format podcast like we're doing today. So please go check that out.
And like and subscribe.
Yes.
And comment. And if you type in Scariest Things Podcast, that will get you there. I think our official channel title, I can't even know. I don't remember what our official
Scariest Things Podcast will get you on YouTube.
Yeah, Scariest Things Podcast will get you there. It's some crazy number. It's Scariest Things and some crazy number that YouTube assigned us.
And unlike the big YouTubers who go out there and regularly say smash that like button because they've got thousands and they're trying to get to YouTube Platinum status, we're just trying to find out who's listening to us.
We're saying stab that like button.
Yeah, it's like this is
Stab
one of those things where we know that we have a small but devoted
that
group
like button right
who
now.
will do anything we want, and if you could do it, that it's just a way for us to sort of track this to make sure that you guys want to see us more often and actually.
What's the
see
worst
us.
that could happen?
Maybe that's not the best way to close that one out there, Liz.
All right, what's our tagline that we're getting out of here with tonight?
Well, this is from a dark song.
Ooh.
Not everything can be forgiven. Words of wisdom.